A lot of folks are not feeling good right now. This government shutdown has caused a lot of financial distress for millions of people, whether from being laid off, not getting paid, or not receiving SNAP benefits. Folks have suffered in some way. In July, Wallet Hub, a personal finance website, publishes findings on the states with the highest levels of financial distress. The ranking was based on various factors, including bankruptcy rates, average credit scores, and the frequency with which residents search for terms indicating financial trouble, such as debt and loans. According to Wallet Hub, the state facing the highest financial distress, Texas, red state, followed by Florida, red state, followed by Louisiana, red state, followed by Nevada, red state, followed by South Carolina, red state, followed by Oklahoma, red state, North Carolina, red state, Mississippi, red state, Kentucky, red state, Alabama, red state. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on with this, and you understand what we're getting here. And so these same people who, and understand, this distress we're talking about is not solely tied to the government shutdown. This distress is also tied directly, let me say it again, it's tied directly to Trump's economic policies. Now, many of y'all may have seen this idiot's interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News, where he says how he owns this economy. But also, you have to come to grips with the reality of his role in causing this economic harm. Now he's trying to float out here this idea of, we're going to give everybody $2,000. Yeah, Congress has to pass that. Let's see if they do that to add to the debt. Morgan Harper joins us right now, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Economic Liberties Project out of Columbus, Ohio. Morgan, glad to have you here. So, Morgan, do you find it interesting when you see Scott Bassett going on television and Trump, all these different people, and how all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the economy's done, yeah, it's a problem, and how they were lying to themselves, trying to dance out of this, but they cannot deny. Trump keeps lying by saying, oh, everything is going down, price is going down. He's lying.
Yeah, I think that there was this false sense among some, not among us on this show, and certainly not with you, Roland, that there was some grand plan to what these guys were doing, that there was going to be this moment where everything turned, and then we would see the fruits of all of their proclamations about how they were going to bring America back and make the economy stronger than ever. And month by month, we've steadily seen, even as maybe the stock market continues to rise, the reality of what economic life is looking like for a lot of Americans and the vast majority of Americans is telling a very different picture. I mean, I saw something today, the administration citing data from DoorDash to prove that the economy is strong. I don't know if you saw that, Roland, but you have the CEO of, I think by definition, we can all agree, is an exploitative company to its workers. They don't even want to claim that they are workers, the independent contractors that they refuse to call workers to get benefits, that they're saying, oh, the basket of goods that people need for breakfast is going down, so the economy must be strong. And we have the White House, that the administration, the national government that is citing this company as proof that their economy is strong. You can't make this stuff up.
I would dare say that the people in those 10 states where they have a lot of economic distress, I would dare say they aren't using DoorDash to deliver food.
Well, or they are, but let's be real. DoorDash is not a career, okay? And even if people are rightly using it to try to get as much money as they can, to try to fill gaps between different jobs that they might have, that is not an economic plan. And the reality of the U.S. economy right now is that we have turned over the reins of this economy to about 7 companies, 7 really large tech companies that tell us that AI is the future and they're going to build the future for us. And what we are seeing on the ground are things like data centers that we as taxpayers pay for, that are a nuisance in communities, that are fueling this supposed great technology that's actually ruining the lives of young people. We're seeing jobs that are being destroyed. I mean, that's another fact that the administration does not want to talk about, is how many layoffs have happened. I think now we're seeing the side of like 1 million layoffs this year, the most layoffs in 20 years in October. And so these are the tale of, I don't even want to say two realities. One is a fantasy land, that they have some kind of idea about how to, or any desire actually, to improve the lives of Americans. And the other is the reality, which is a lot of people, and you're right, before the shutdown, were struggling. And let's be honest, before this administration, struggling. And it really is becoming a bit of a breaking point that we all need to come to grips with, and that demands people of competence and good intentions that are in charge of the government.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know they're lying. And now they're delaying the jobs report again, and now suggesting, it's going to be some time, because they don't want that bad news every month. Oh, and see, what's going to be their excuse now, Morgan, now that the government is going to be reopening? The House is going to vote. It's going to happen. So I can't wait to hear what the excuse is going to be on the first Friday in December.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm pretty skeptical that they're just going to get back to work and I don't doubt the quality of the career staff there, the statisticians that usually put that data out. Whether or not they will be free once back in their jobs to actually do their jobs is a huge question mark. I mean, they've already said, that they don't even want to go back and look at what happened in October. They're just going to keep it moving. So that alone might compromise some of the overall aggregate statistics that we're seeing come out of the administration from here, to the extent that we do see them. And look, I mean, like I just said, they're pretty comfortable subbing in data from a private corporation and calling that economic indicators, right? Instead of actually having the comprehensive data that the government at the Bureau of Labor Statistics is used to. And again, I mean, there's just so many indicators. I mean, another one I'll throw out there, that we're starting to see this uptick in subprime borrowers, auto loan delinquencies. I mean, a lot of these, the places that I'm sure we're all familiar with, you go, you finance on the spot, you get a car. The consumers that are using those are now increase in defaults, that some of those companies are going bankrupt. And this is another one of those potentially early signs, leading indicators of real trouble ahead. And so, we have to continue, and I'm going to say it again, it's like the stock market is not the reality of what is going on with the U.S. economy. It's a data point. It is not complete, and we need to continue to be outspoken about what the reality is that's happening on the ground in our communities across the country of what this administration's policies are doing. And really, like I was saying before, what an economy that's been turned over to a lot of very large corporations that are comfortable to destroy jobs rather than create them, what they're causing to.
Well, and not only that, Morgan, now we got these idiots proposing a 50-year mortgage. What? Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting one. The fact that we have somebody in charge of the FHFA that is also compromised in having worked, Pulte is who I'm talking about, the guy who supposedly, I guess, pitched Trump directly with this idea of the 50-year mortgage, and just one day at Mar-a-Lago, and then Trump just kind of tweeted it out, and then that became a potential policy. And it's kind of absurd that this is where we find ourselves, because this guy himself is in the home building industry. He has already proven to be pretty corrupt. And so how he could be in charge of this agency that's responsible for financing a lot of the home building, the mortgage industry in this country is, I don't even know what we do with that. And so, the fact that he's throwing out there this idea of 50-year mortgage, that you're going to tie people up in this, that it's not going to, a lot of the money that you put into a mortgage at the beginning is towards interest. So it's kind of extending that period and delaying how soon people will get to equity, which then continues to fuel activity in the housing market. I think that's why people had a lot of strong reactions to this, that this is a bad idea, even within the administration, that we're trying to immediately backtrack once the president started promoting this idea from Pulte.
But see, here's the thing here, Morgan. Again, when we talk about what's happening here, and we have to confront the truth, and that is by 2030, 40% of America's housing stock, 5 years from now, is going to be owned by Wall Street. These people do not want folks buying homes. They want people to keep renting and paying higher and higher and higher. And the reality is, by proposing a 50-year mortgage, so that means that, if you're 30, you buy a house, let's say I'm going to pay it off when I'm 80. So all that's going to do is, and the banks are sitting here going, ooh, man, we about to get paid. I mean, I remember that, I guess it was, Morgan, this may have been 2007 or 8. And I remember I had overpaid taxes. And it was like a $25,000 check.
I don't do
Yeah,
that.
so I overpaid. Actually, it happened a couple times. I overpaid taxes, got the money back, and I immediately applied it to the house I owned. And I remember my financial advisor was like, "Well, do you want to do that?" Because we were able to write off the interest paid on the house. And I said, well, let's do some math here. I said, in the next 10 years, if I just keep paying on the mortgage, I'm going to be able to write off the interest. But how much am I paying in interest? I said, how about I just pay the house off and now I own it outright and all I'm doing every year paying property taxes? That to me made a hell of a lot more sense. What it also did, and that's exactly what I did, and it was an absolutely smart play. Now, there are some people out there, Morgan, who say, well, no, debt's good. That's fine. I'm not interested in playing the debt game. But the point there, I paid it off early. So what, I bought it in 99. So now all of a sudden you're talking about paying it off literally within inside of 10 years. You damn right. No, I'm sorry. I take that. Bought it in 99 and paid it off. I think it was like in 07, 08. But I wasn't interested in paying interest on a house for 30 years. It's just like when I bought a car. I paid for the car in cash because I sat there and said, wait a minute, why am I going to pay interest every month for 4 to 5 years on the car? If you add up the interest you're paying, hell, you paying for 2 or 3 cars. And that's what's happening with the housing market. But it goes to show you these numbskulls in D.C., all they want to do is empower and make richer big companies.
Well, that I completely agree with. I mean, the only thing I would add on the specific loans that people might be considering or the 30-year mortgage or whatever is, part of the idea is a lot of folks, we have set up a system supposedly trying to incentivize people to start a home, get a single family home, and then continue to be active in the housing market. A lot of people might have a first home that fits the needs of their individual lives or their, the beginning of their family life with kids, that then it changes over time. You might need more space. So the longer you're locked in to that one mortgage transaction, Roland, you're exactly right. I don't know how much I'll speak for myself. Life has changed a lot over 10 years. I don't know how much people expect their lives to not change at all over 50 years and think that the needs that they had for housing when they were 30 something, if they're lucky to be able to purchase a home with a mortgage, are going to be the same when they're 80 seems very unlikely to me. And so, but that being said, I mean, having access to these types of financing tools does allow people to get into the home market. But if you are locked into a really long transaction, you kind of lose the ability to have flexibility to then sell, decide to sell earlier, use some of that equity to get into a different size home, et cetera. So it's that 50-year mortgage overall is not a good idea. I think mortgages and the length of them, depending on your situation, can make sense. But most importantly, and the point that you started with, we are not currently seeing a housing market that is working for that beginning family that I described, or an individual that wants access to be able to buy a single family home. That is increasingly out of reach for people for a number of reasons, including that we're starting to see, the corporatization of housing and more folks that are on, more companies that are on Wall Street that are starting to buy up. Now, another thing that's happening, and actually Economic Liberties, where I work, is about to put out a paper on this next week. We're starting to see a lot more home building that is like build to rent. So, among these very large home builder companies that are publicly traded on Wall Street, they're not even trying to pretend like they're, creating housing for families to be able to build equity and this will be an asset that'll build wealth for you. They're just like, no, we want you trapped forever. And so we're building homes, single family homes, to only be rental homes. That's the play.
Oh, absolutely. And so I just need people to understand what is going on here. Donald, the tech people, the real estate people, the banking people, all these people, the billionaires who are supporting Donald Trump and raping and pillaging the U.S. economy, they want this pain. Let's be real clear, all right? These farmers, these MAGA farmers who are crying, let me tell y'all, they're going to be buying your land up. It's going to happen. See, so all these people, and I'm telling you, Mark, that's why I said sometimes you do have to let things happen. And what these people are about to experience, they are experiencing an economic calamity, and they fell for, oh my God, when I get in, the sun will always shine. There will be no rain, there'll be no wind, there'll be no cold. It will be perfect conditions at all times. I will solve every problem. I will end every war on day one. I will lower all prices on day one. I will be the savior of the world. Now they're realizing that he's the devil. And what? They're going to blame Joe Biden the next 4 years? They're going to try to pin this on Obama? No, guess so. I was like, you know what? Y'all are about to feel the pain. Congratulations. You did it to yourselves.
Yes, I agree with you, Roland. This is almost what I would describe as like the end game, the acceleration of a lot of trends that were already happening in the economy. So I agree. Trump, his administration, corrupt to its core. I don't know how anyone could deny that at this point. Certainly not working in the best interests of the average American, including a lot of people who voted for them. But I do think we also need to be honest, just coming back to the housing finance point, for example. I mean, a lot of the trends that got us to this highly consolidated housing market where we have, just a few big players in some cases that are getting they're on the stock market trying to appease their shareholders instead of creating those single-family home buying opportunities for the average family and individual, is by policies and deregulation that started under Jimmy Carter, that was continued by Ronald Reagan, that moved into the 90s and became the consensus of both parties. So I agree with you. What we're seeing right now is extreme. But again, a lot of this has been slowly building up over the last 40 years because we have had a lot of federal policy making that is being driven by the interests of Wall Street over Main Street.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just and again, I want people to realize what is happening to our economy. I'm about to go to our panel as well. What is happening to our economy right now is more and more of this economy is frankly driven by paper jobs, really it was in the finance sector. And what these people have got to understand is all this talk, Trump's going to bring back manufacturing. No, he's not. In fact, there was more manufacturing created under President Biden than you're seeing under Donald Trump. And to your whole point about AI, all of these people, all AI is just going to solve every world problem. No, it's not. No, it's not. And not only that, these companies are, NVIDIA is now $1 trillion, $5 trillion or whatever the hell. They ain't made a profit. So I'm just sort of like, okay. And to your point, everybody's going crazy, the data centers, all this sort of stuff. And I told somebody, when we were in Virginia, they were like, well, you're opposed to. I said, no, I never ever said I oppose data centers. What I said was we had better properly vet data centers to make sure that we're not seeing the massive consumption of water. We better vet data centers so we're not going to see utility rates explode in rural America. We may want to vet data centers to make sure that we're clear on the health implications.
Yeah.
Huh?
And urban, not just a rural issue. I mean, take a look.
Yeah. No. The reason I said rural, because what's happening in Texas, Louisiana, and so what's happening is they are specifically targeting rural areas, and there are many politicians in rural America who are like, come for the jobs, but there's a bunch of stuff that also comes with that. And all I said is you better be vetting it and talking to the experts so you don't make a short-term economic decision that could have long-term negative implications on your town, on your county, on your region.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not, well, maybe I am kind of anti-conservative. I'm not anti-technology. I think we all have benefited from the development of technology. A lot of these tech companies started out with innovations that were a value add to how we were interacting with each other. But the reality is now we have 7 companies that are driving the central planning of the United States of America, and the government is secondary to what they want. And these data centers are just one example of that on the ground. That I agree with you. I mean, I think the play is trying to get folks in rural, a lot of them are being built in rural areas, but increasingly they depend on the annexing of things like the water supply from cities like Columbus, Ohio. That's going to increase the rates of water here, which is an issue that our city council is talking about just this week. So the issue, from my perspective, is we don't have a plan. The plan is whatever these companies want, and we'll look up in 10, in 20 years and realize, oh, they got exactly what they wanted. We lost everything, and the government was just kind of like on the sidelines unless we kick things into high gear quite quickly and start to all put a lot more pressure on what types of decisions are happening and have like a real government, a real plan about how we are going to have an economy where people are able to work, earn enough money to live, start businesses, build businesses that actually add some value, not just ruin the mental health of young people.
Well, the thing for me is, on this whole deal, this is a corrupt administration whose sole purpose is to get richer by crypto and Silicon Valley and all this sort of stuff. So all these people are going to realize by 2029, they're going to look up and realize, man, how much did they rape and pillage this country? And that's exactly what these people have in mind. To the panel, Rebecca, your question for Morgan Harper on what's happening with the American economy.
Okay, Morgan, I'm trying to make sure that I'm fully processing and understanding everything that you just said. So this is what I heard from you, is that with mortgages going to a 50-year term, which means it's a lower monthly premium, which creates more affordability for people to be able to obtain a mortgage. But I'm also seeing that groups like Fannie Mae is going to lower the credit minimum in order to qualify for mortgages. So now what I'm hearing from that is that people who might be less financially stable to be able to afford a long-term mortgage are going to be able to enter into a market, obtain mortgages that are backed by the federal government. And if they default, these companies may be predatory who are giving these mortgages to these people will still be able to get their money back from the government in the case of a default. So this feels very 2006 to me. Is this what I'm actually hearing? Am I processing what you're saying correctly?
Well, to be clear, I mean, this 50-year mortgage thing just kind of like came up out of nowhere. And so I don't know that we know for certain how it would play out. The proposal kind of assumes, if you want to call it that, but like I said, it was suggested, and it sounds like a pretty random way, that this would somehow be more affordable for the average American through a lower monthly payment. But I think experts are kind of split on this. With whatever the impact on interest rates is, it might offset whatever that the decrease in the monthly payment. So it's not totally clear that it would be cheaper. But the point that I was making, is that it's going to lock people into these transactions for a longer period of time and limit their ability to potentially, refinance or trade up to try to get into a bigger house, or maybe whatever house you lock this financing in for, you want to downsize at some point before you turn 80, after 50 years of having the mortgage. And so then you're going to be a little less agile to be able to do that. I think what you're describing about, some of the credit risk, that could also be a possible risk here, though. I mean, that is something that is, kind of baked into our system, that the government is backing up a lot of the securitization of loans that are happening through the government-sponsored entities, Fannie and Freddie Mac.
Roland, can I ask a follow-up here?
Zachary. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, so Morgan, is the better analogy where you went from like 48 to 60 months to 72, now 96 month car loans, and then people keep rolling in some of the negative equity into the next car when they keep upgrading their cars?
I think it is kind of a good analogy. And again, I haven't looked deeply into this 50-year proposal because it hasn't really been something that's been suggested before. But yeah, it's not, even if in the moment it's getting you to something that feels like it's more affordable, if long term it's just locking you into this relationship with this one lender, and then they're able to securitize out of that long relationship with you to get more money out of putting the equity of your transaction on the stock market, well, that is almost always a good deal for big banks and less of a good deal for the average consumer who's taking out that type of loan.
Zachary.
Morgan, it's really mind-blowing, and it's really great information that you're giving us. One thing that's really baffling to me is how, President Trump is using the bully pulpit to push on Americans the concept that there isn't an affordability crisis, that these issues that we know are real aren't real, that we're somehow imagining them, that when we go in the grocery stores, prices aren't higher, that when we're trying to get homes, it's not harder. How can we fight back against the government telling us that we're not in an affordability crisis when in reality we are? Like, what can we do to really help our fellow Americans see the truth behind what we're living with in this Trump economy?
Yeah, I think this is an area where we can use the positive aspect of some of the technology and the firms that we're talking about is to tell our own story. You don't have to wait for the media to decide what you're saying is accurate or important to know. Just kind of like hit the grocery store. I would love to see people in reaction to this DoorDash survey of the American economy and how it's doing, that breakfast is going down, to do their own little basket of goods and let the DoorDash CEO know what's actually happening. Even better, add a layer onto it, how much you make in a week using DoorDash and how much of your expenses that covers. That would be interesting content. I think that would be content that would get the attention of hopefully people's elected officials and eventually trickle up to the president and media who's covering his promotion of these things and kind of like give them fodder for questioning what he's saying. We've got to all recognize that we have a role to be playing here, and we're in a full-on war for the future. And I don't really use that term lightly, but I think that's where we're at. We have one of the most corrupt administrations in history. Not that corruption didn't exist before, but it's extremely blatant with this administration. And they're going to try to get as much out of it as they can while they can, and don't really care about what's left on the other side for the rest of us. So I think this is the time for all of us to consider ourselves really active in this fight and sharing our own story about the reality of what's going on.
Larry.
Yeah, Morgan, I get the feeling with all these economic indicators, I'm getting really the vibes we saw in a recession that began during Bush Jr. Term. And let me give an example of what I mean. I saw in the newspaper, Baltimore Banner, a couple weeks ago about this New York-based venture company, EGBE, I believe, that bought all these properties in Baltimore and then defaulted on all the loans. And you talked about, kind of Wall Street, and we talk about Baltimore, the scene, the drop in crime. But then you take it that this company bought all these homes and now defaulted, and the economic impact that's going to have. And I want you to make that connection between what we may see in terms of some, foreclosures and how Wall Street is contributing to this issue.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that company. So was that was like a large property owner in Baltimore? Are they national? Do you know?
Yeah, they're based out of New York, venture capitalists, and they apparently got all these loans and bought all these houses in Baltimore, then defaulted.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, I don't know that specific company, but generally what's happening in the housing market is this connection to Wall Street. I mean, this idea that we just had, like we had before the 1970s and deregulation, the system was very different. That was a situation where you would have a whole different sizes of banks that were lending to builders to produce single-family homes of different sizes, homes that would meet people at different income levels, and that was all financed by the federal government. When we deregulated, we kind of took away that layer of the banking industry that would support a different range of home builders, many of whom were rooted in their local communities to be able to meet the needs of that market. And we turned the housing industry over to Wall Street. And so it's no surprise that by the 90s, then we started to see a lot of the, large home builders were going public throughout that decade. And once you go public, you have to appease your shareholders. And so, part of why we look around and see like, oh, there's this housing gap. We need to, have more supply. Why are people building? Well, the answer is partly because they don't have to. And so you have a really, really limited supply of housing. And then to your point, or the example you're mentioning, then you have folks, okay, well, as the prices of that existing housing stock go up and up and up because there's limited supply, who's able to play in that market? Well, the people that have the most capital. And a lot of times those will be more of these, LLCs and private equity that might be able to then buy up some of these houses in bulk. And their game there is to scale as much as they can to reduce their costs and increase their cash flow. And so if they're not going to make as much money of trying to we'll redo a home and then find the perfect family to buy it so they can build their life. It's like, no, we're gonna redo this home so we can start renting it out to people, try to get fees on top of whatever they're paying for rent and extract as much money out of them as possible as quickly as we can. Now, if some of those companies then decide to start making risky bets with their portfolio of housing, like you say, happening potentially with this group in Baltimore, well, then they go under, and then that just eliminates a whole set of what was, maybe even not that affordable, but at least some significant chunk of a housing market in a particular area that might have been available for people who are renting. And so, the housing market, I think, can sometimes seem, from like a policy or whatever, like very complex. But I think the most important point to take away from our discussion on this front is right now we have a housing market that is dominated by the interests of Wall Street. It doesn't have to be this way. Before the 1970s, we had a much more diverse finance market with different sizes of banks and different types of builders that was creating the different types of housing that actually met the needs of working people throughout this country. We can get back to that, but it is going to require a different type of approach from the government than we've had since we began deregulating in the 1970s.
And listen, to deal with the reality of housing, you're also going to have these cities getting away from this bogus bullshit, Morgan, of these developers who want to build housing tied to anchor stores and restaurants and shops and others, when in reality, all they're looking for are in these condos, if you will, are $500,000, $750,000, $1 million. And we're seeing this all around the country. And I'm always, I go to these cities and I see this stuff and I'm going, who the hell is going to afford living here? You see what happened? All of these people rushed into Nashville and they exploded with housing, all this very high housing in Nashville. Guess what? Ain't enough people to put them in there who can afford it. And you're not going to have a country. I'm sorry. I don't care. You can't keep going to these places and starting cost of homes are $400,000 and $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million. Ain't enough people making that kind of money to live in these places.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, and I think that connects to the question about, well, yeah, who can afford to buy up, housing at that level is people that already have a lot of money. It's not, you and me is like working every day and trying to like cobble together savings. So it kind of reinforces or opens up this lane for, private equity funds, et cetera, to be able to gobble up and build out these portfolios. But I do think it's important to note, I mean, the percentage of the overall housing stock throughout the country that's owned by PE firms and these corporate landlords isn't as large. I think it's we have to look at some of these other factors that are playing into why we have limited supply. And I agree with you, Roland. I mean, I think one of the things that has prevented us.
First of all, let's be clear. We have limited supply because the 2008 housing foreclosure crisis completely stifled the housing market for a decade. Between 2010 and 2020. We built the fewest amount of housing since the 1930s. And when we built that few number of homes in the 1930s, that's what led to the Federal Housing Authority. Okay? So then you go from 2010 to 2020, and then you go 2020 to present day. So we're now in the second decade where we are building fewer houses than we built since the 1930s. We were building anywhere from you're talking about anywhere from 10 to 14 million houses per decade. Well, that completely changed with that foreclosure crisis. And so, matter of fact, I talk about this so much. Give me 1 second. I want to see if I can, let's see if I can pull this up. So, let's see if I can pull this up. Let's go. All right. Well, that didn't take. Give me 1 second. So, bottom line is I'm looking right here in 1930 to 1939, we built 2.67 million homes. 1940 to 1949, 4.79 million. Then it jumped to 10.08. And then 9.49, 1970 to 79 was 12.37, 1980 to 89 was 12.14, 1990 to 1999 was 12.49, 2000 2009 was 14.56, 2010 to 2019 was 6.9. That was the lowest amount of housing built since 1940 to 1949. And so that's what we're facing. The home foreclosure crisis, what took place, those subprime loans, all that financial chicanery from Wall Street spooked developers. And we're now here we are in 2025, still dealing with an issue that was exacerbated and created in 2008.
Yeah, I agreed with that. The other thing I would note, though, is that after the financial crisis, some of the government's responses to that they gave preferential treatment to larger developers in the form of like tax credit. You're going to love this paper we're putting out, Roland, so I'm going to make sure to send it to you when it comes out next week. But they did favor some of the large developers who were able to withstand the crisis better, and then that further pushed small, medium-sized home builders out of business. And these large developers, responsive to Wall Street, they do not have to build if they don't want to build.
And again, one of the other big mistakes, and we just have to be very honest here, it was a mistake of the Obama administration Bush, then Obama, to bail out the banks and allow them to use that money to fortify their balance sheets. And what did they do? They held onto those homes, Morgan, and they then said, we no longer have distressed properties. So now we're going to hold on to these homes. And then when the real estate market, housing market rebounded, they then began to sell 20 and 25,000 blocks of homes to private equity. And so if you were a husband and a wife and you saved your money up and you got your credit straight and you were looking to get your first house, you couldn't compete against private equity. And so we saw this take place in Arizona. We saw this in Texas. We saw this in Georgia. And so now all of a sudden, that also contributed to the problem, because you had people who normally, the cycle of life, who normally should have been making their way from renting into owning, they couldn't compete when the banks unloaded all of those homes to private equity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a really important conversation for us to be having, especially as we look ahead to the next couple of years. To, there's going to be, we've already seen the start of election season since last week, but this is one of the areas where I do think it's really important that we're honest about some of the mistakes that were made, so that we can actually start to fix some of these problems. The other thing I would note is, just talking about the interplay between like local government and some of the federal or the national trends that are happening. What we've also seen is, as some local governments, maybe has a strong leader that's trying to put in more, tenant protections or limitations on just how much, how many fees a landlord could charge or whatever, then those landlords that are often operating as these LLCs, the kind of like more regionalized or nationalized housing portfolios, are just packing up shop and moving to the localities where they don't have as many rules in place, right? And so it's kind of this like regulation arbitrage is like, oh, you're trying to tell us what we can and cannot charge people. Well, we just want to get out of this state altogether, and we'll go where we can treat people like shit and get as much money from them as possible. So again, I think that is another reason to call for, more of like a national strategy. But yeah, really, really important to reflect on how we got here.
And again, so I know there are people who are watching who are saying, oh my God, y'all are just going down this path and it's absolutely driving me crazy. But I need people to understand that when we're having this conversation, y'all gotta be prepared for what's about to go down. We are seeing, Morgan mentioned earlier, the massive layoffs. You hear, look, I just got earlier today, Omnicom or whatever the hell, there was an ad agency, IPG, that bought them, they're sitting here laying off some 3,200 people. What AI is going to do, Amazon, what they're about to do. And so all of these people who are claiming AI is going to be the savior of the world, we're going to be talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs. And these are going to be, Morgan, highly educated, some college degree, high school diplomas. People need to understand what's about to go down. And I'm telling you, it's going to be ugly. And these tech tycoons and these billionaires, they don't care. They are operating. Look, these company CEOs, CEO pay has never been at its largest in American history. The gap between the average pay of a worker and the CEO has never been this high. And so folk better buckle up, because what we have right now in Washington, D.C., with this corrupt White House and with Republicans controlling the House and the Senate is, if you are big business, if you are billionaires, you're oligarchs, if you are these type of people, you are in the best position to do whatever you want without any government oversight. Donald Trump is letting all those people, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, hit. They are letting those people walk free. And we are about to see corporate America run amok, because you've got an administration that says y'all can do whatever y'all want. And all that bullshit with Republicans and the American worker, it's lies. They are not standing up for the American worker, and that's a fact. Final comment, Morgan.
Two final points. One, everything that we've just talked about with the housing market is somewhat unique because of how much the government's involved with the housing market, but in some ways not. The financialization of these large housing and home builders is the same dynamic that's happening across the economy, like, United Healthcare, airlines. These companies are as much banks at this point and playing financial trickery than actually like adding or building product or providing a service. I think that's important for all of us to understand. The other point I would make, and ending on a somewhat more positive note, is, there's an alternative path. We have built things before. We can have an economy that's rooted in that. I think none of us have to look very far in our daily lives and see problems or issues that we could apply some skill sets and talent to and improve the lives of everyone and ourselves around us. So let's focus on that. And those are the kinds of plans we need to be putting together when we hopefully get to the next phase of all this.
Yep. Morgan Harper, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you. Thanks, Roland.
All right, then. Final comment with the panel. You know, Rebecca, I'm telling you, I guarantee you there's somebody there like, okay, man, my eyes are glossing over, this stuff you're talking about. But you're not going to see, and I'm telling you, I spent 6 years in CNN, and if you turn to CNBC, if you turn to Bloomberg, they are not having conversations about this economy, about how it's impacting workers. They are not. Because I need people to understand the financial networks, they treat the stock market like, okay, I'm at the PGA, I'm here in Bermuda for the Butterfield Bermuda Championship. Birdie, eagle, birdie. They don't celebrate bogeys and double bogeys. They want to see basketball scores higher. They want to see more touchdowns in football. They are economic cheerleaders. These networks do not want to bring any real understanding. They are focused on Wall Street. They are focused on CEOs. They're not focused on the people who work for government, who supply their pension fund dollars is what drives Wall Street. They ain't talking about those workers. And so people need to understand what we are about to embark on is a dramatic reshaping of the American economy. And with this nutcase in the White House and with these Republicans controlling Congress, they are going to let corporate interests do whatever they want. There are no restraints, and that is absolutely scary, Rebecca.
Roland, we spent about the last 50 minutes of the show talking about the economy. The reason why that's so important is that over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the government shutdown, the immediate impact to federal government workers. We've been talking about folks across the country who receive SNAP benefits and who haven't been able to use those SNAP benefits since the government shut down. But while we were all talking about those very pressing issues, and those are very pressing issues, those are also short-term issues. What was happening is these large corporations, these oligarchs, were having conversations about trillion-dollar evaluations of their companies. I just want that to sink in for people. I remember 20 years ago, the idea of being a millionaire, having $1 million liquid cash in the bank was a very big deal. That same $1 million of cash, if you're fortunate or lucky enough to have that in your savings, it doesn't go very far now. Just the scale, like you talked about, by 2030, when we're looking at all of these oligarchs, how they are literally carving up the American economy, and they're taking taxpayers' dollars, and they're figuring out how they get to spend it, how their companies could be subsidized. It's a completely different game that's being played here. In fact, the last thing I want to say here, especially when we're talking about the housing market and we think about some of these rules that are changing, there are VCs, venture capitalist firms, that are buying 500,000 doors, 1 million doors, and they're buying them not just in urban corridors, but also in rural areas. When you ask your relatives or friends, or if you yourself live in a rural area, those small homes, those 1 or 2 bedroom apartments now, those are also skyrocketing in prices. It's not just cities like Washington, D.C. or Chicago or L.A. or New York that has a $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a month a 2-bedroom or even 1 bedroom. That's also happening in rural areas where things are going $1,500, $2,000, $2,500. In essence, what we are seeing is that Americans are being boxed out of the American economy.
Well, there were a lot of corporate people, Larry, who did not like Lena Khan when she was over the Federal Trade Commission. They couldn't stand her. They couldn't, because she was blocking mergers. And I'm telling you right now, listen, the Trump people okayed the Paramount acquisition by Skydance. And now Paramount is talking about, or they've submitted several offers to buy Warner Discovery. Well, guess what? The film industry in Georgia has completely evaporated. I mean, it has been, it estimates some 20, 30,000 jobs lost. Now you have the Department of Justice in California said, hey, they're going to be investigating this Warner Discovery thing because it's going to lead to more jobs. I need people to understand, when you have mergers and acquisitions and when you have monopolies, that means people are going to get laid off. And they hated Lena Khan because she didn't approve the JetBlue merger with Spirit. She didn't approve several others, and they hated her for that. But her whole deal was, this is going to lead to lack of competition and massive job loss. And so folk got to understand what's happening before our very eyes.
Yeah, Roland, we're living in a period where they're robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. Rebecca called them oligarchs, and I mean that term. It really describes what we're experiencing. Mark Zuckerberg and these Bezos and these ultra rich billion, soon to be in the case of some trillionaires. And the United States is getting, the average United States citizen is getting robbed blind. And we've got 3 more years of this. The most troubling part is a lot of American working class, middle class folks, there are far too many of them, voted for this. And the economic despair that this country is going to experience between, we talked about Affordable Care Act subsidies, the dramatic increase in the unemployment rate, particularly we talk about, certainly we see with the black community, what is 7.4%, whatever it is right now. In addition to that, the number of bankruptcies. And then, I shared the story. I talked about what happened with this venture capitalist firm, which Rebecca, talked about that in terms of what they're doing. They're robbing, they're undermining what the American dream is, and they're robbing us blind. And the administration doesn't care. Throw me $1 million for the ballroom, or come give me a gold cup with my name on it, or a crown, and I'll bless you and tell you to go on and continue to rob the poor folks. And I just don't, Americans don't know the level of despair we're going to experience over the next couple of years. We're already in a recession. I hear this, let's talk the last couple of weeks of we're getting there, but we're already in a recession.
Well, Zachary, here's a perfect example. This is just understand where we're going. You take a McKinsey Scott. McKinsey Scott has donated the last 5 years close to $700 million just to HBCUs. Just to HBCUs. Yet if you look at the giving, of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they got more money than her. Don't come close. Now, granted, she's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. I was reading a story how Warren Buffett, there was a giving pledge where he agreed to give 99% of his wealth away before he passed away. Well, then, so I saw a story and it was like, I think it said 23 people agreed to it or something like that, but only 9 are continuing with it. So why am I stating that? Because what we're now facing, let's make more. And to Rebecca's point, we're in this thing where it's, no, I need more. And so there's a larger concentration of America's wealth in the hands of the richest of the rich. And the only way they can make more is if everybody else makes less. That's the only way. And they don't care. Because now it's about, hey, I need a bigger yacht. No, I'm sorry. I'm Jeff Bezos. I need a second yacht to follow my large yacht because I need the second yacht to carry the stuff on it that we can't fit on the large yacht. And it's my private plane. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and it's actually not about people. And I'm telling for the people who are sitting here, all of these people who thought Trump is their savior, the Democrats have forgotten the working class, the Democrat. I'm like, oh, y'all are about to see these rich folks get more wealth than they could have thought about in the next 3 years. It's going to be ugly. And it's a whole bunch of MAGA voting people who are going to be crying, oh my God, what happened? And all we're going to do is, we tried to tell you.
It is ugly. It's going to get a lot ugly. It's going to be as ugly as J.D. Vance after a weekend with Peter Thiel. Speaking of the filthy rich and the filthy people in general. Roland, you brought up and mentioned earlier Lena Khan, and it's so crazy that you brought her up because I was reading about her today and the work that she is now doing with Zohran Mamdani's mayoral transition team. And it's really great to see people who are in regards really focused on progressive economic policies being kept into the spotlight to do the work. You talked about Jeff Bezos and you talked about Elon Musk and how they're not giving. Roland, they're giving. They're giving. They're giving to Donald Trump. They're giving to the former East Wing of the White House that's now being turned into some kind of ballroom and maybe some kind of escape bunker. Like they're giving. They're just not giving to the American people. So huge shout out to Mackenzie Scott. So thankful for the work she's doing to stand in the gaps as our HBCUs are consistently losing funding, as the American people, the American worker are consistently being hurt by these policies. And yeah, this is absolutely a time frame when the American billionaires are moving to gain more money and gain more wealth by the policies being put in place by the Trump administration. But you know what? That's our fault. That's your fault. That's my fault. That's the viewer's fault, because we're the ones making the money. They are giving us less. They're working us more. And we have the onus and the responsibility to stop this lies with us. We have to fight back. That's why during the upcoming economic blackout, we got to fucking black out. We've got to black out. No shopping, no buying. Crush the sales for Black Friday. We have to hit Amazon where it hurts in the same way that we hit Target where it hurts. We got to hit Sephora where it hurts because they want to mock us. We have to do our part as the people to fight back with every means possible. And that's why I'm all about what's coming this month of the boycott and what will happen afterwards, because yeah, the government's going to continue to give them breaks. The government's going to continue to help them get rich, but we have the economic power to hold back and to stop it, and we have to exercise it.